Welcome to the June 23rd Bible study for North Coast United Methodist Church. My name is the Reverend Michael Drew Davis, and it is a blessing to celebrate with you at this time. I'll try to keep positioning myself that I can stay in the light as we take a little bit of time today during this Bible study. I want to talk about some impressions I got from the 2020 California Pacific Annual Conference gathering that took place last week, June 18th through the 20th. And it was a very unique experience. It was the first time in its history that it was completely an electronic formatted gathering, held over a Zoom meeting place and held on different Zoom platforms, small groups, large group discussions and voting. And just the blessing to have been in this environment. Now, I had three takeaways from annual conference, and I want to share with them with you. And I need to preface this because I actually put these on my Facebook page, and the first two were not received as the jokes as intended, but because they weren't received as the jokes as intended, I actually started praying over it, and that prayer became today's Bible study. So I'm going to share with you some true revelations I had with the CalPAC Annual Conference gathering this year, and I'm going to share with you the jokes that I made, but I'm going to repair the jokes into some real true truths of who we are as United Methodists in the California Pacific Conference. The first thing that I put down, the 3 points my three takeaways from the CalPAC Annual Conference this year. The first one was, can you hear me? Can you hear me? This year, with this being the electronic format, and for many of our participants, a new adventure and holy conferencing. There were individuals that forgot to turn on their microphones. There are individuals that were not speaking clearly and directing their voices into the microphones. And the common phrase, I think the common phrase that was said the most during this conference was, can you hear me? And it became quite comical because at times one person would be saying, I can't hear you, while the other person was saying, can you hear me? I want to look at that to talk about that more deeply and more of an honest truth in that. We as individuals of faith are called to go out and find the hurts and pains in the world, to go out and hear the screaming voices calling for help. And as we've looked over the last few weeks with the protests sparked by the death of George Floyd, as we've watched individuals suffer and many hundreds of thousands of people pass away from the COVID-19 virus, there's a lot of people hurting and screaming and calling out for help right now. You know, even in the reality of the people who are not suffering from social injustice or even suffering from physical ills, you know, we have individuals who right now, because of social distancing, because of self-quarantining, we have individuals that feel forgotten. We have individuals that have not seen others in months and feel forgotten. And their voices calling out, do you remember me? Are shouting, and they're voices that we need to hear. I'm blessed to know that we as individuals, excuse me, this is live to tape, so God bless, I'm sorry, excuse me. I want us to remember those individuals that kind of feel forgotten and wonder if we still hear them or still remember them. Our church, North Coast United Methodist Church, has been very blessed by an active visitation program that's volunteer-led. And this volunteer-led group stopped being a physical visitation group in March and became a group that focused on tele-visitation, tele-outreach, and the blessings that has come from that. one of the things that I try to do, I'm not always successful, but I have a phone list, and I try to call through that phone list in a 2-week span. And the greatest blessing that I have as a pastor of North Coast United Methodist Church is when I call somebody through my phone list, I already hear how church member so-and-so just checked in. Church member so-and-so calls me every week. And as we deal with this idea, can you hear me? It's a blessing to know that there are individuals listening, reaching out and listening. There's so many things that we are dealing with right now culturally as we deal with, can you hear me? We are dealing with severe racial injustice. We are. This past week was Juneteenth, June 19th, Juneteenth, the celebration of the last group finally hearing about the Emancipation Proclamation, Juneteenth. And what bothers me, and I think about this in the time period of what it is. Abraham Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation, and then, here's where I'm going to mess up. It's either 2 or 3 years later, finally it gets all the way down to Texas that these people, these slaves, these dear friends, have been free for 3 years. And they finally get the message. And there's dear friends that had this place, an avenue of freedom that they didn't know about. See, that's something that I've dealt with and pondered over as I deal with the phrase, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Sometimes we have dear friends searching for help and they can't hear the voices screaming back to them. You know, over the last few years, I've dealt with an institutionalized faith that has had a black eye in the society of people who need the love and grace that comes from Jesus Christ. As we have dealt as a denomination over LGBTQIA plus issues, we have dear friends who want to experience pure love, and they receive from the place that should be supplying true love and grace that they're not wanted. There are voices that call out that you're wanted. There are voices that call out outside of the institutionalized discrimination that you're important. And this whole thing has become this journey of, can you hear me? Can we hear the voices calling out for help? And can the voices calling out for help hear us chanting back, we're here from them? For them. Can you hear me? All right, here's the second thing, and this is the second sort of joke that I made. The second thing is you have to turn on your microphone. You have to turn on your microphone. Now, there's so many times I was in small group meetings and I just saw mouths moving. And the moderator, the leader of the group said, you have to turn on your microphone. We have to use all the tools that we can to amplify that we're calling back to the voices that are shouting out for help. We have to use all the tools that we can to amplify that Christ's grace still exists. We have to turn on the microphones of our gifts, skills, and graces so that we can have the voice of care and love overcome the dampening silence of fear and hurt. We do care. During the annual conference meeting, a very dear pastoral friend of mine, the Reverend Gary Williams, spoke about what it was like to grow up as an African-American teenager in the time period that he grew up. And he shared his stories of fear and worry from people who were supposed to be the protectors and the guiders. And that voice, that Reverend Williams using his voice, amplifying his voice to share his personal experience, his personal altercations, helped me hear a voice screaming for help louder than I've ever heard it before. You know, it's one thing when it's a person in Minnesota that you've never met and you're still heartbroken because 8 minutes and 46 seconds is a really long time. And a dear soul was removed because people didn't do the things that they should have in a really long time. And that's a person I didn't have a personal connection with, but I do have a personal connection with Reverend Williams. And to hear him share his story, his journey, his fears, his worries, it shone a brighter light on a situation that my heart was already open to. We have friends, personal friends, who are suffering in so many different ways, whether it be racial injustice or the injustice of equality, whether it be the dear souls that are home shouting out for help, do you remember me? We have personal experiences with all of these voices shouting out, can you hear me? And they need to have their microphones turned on so that they can be heard. And sometimes we are the ones within our skills, graces, and privilege that can turn their microphones on for them and help them be heard. You know, it's a very special thing. It's a very special reality of realizing that we are empowered to be the ones that can help other voices be heard by using our own voices. I shared a few weeks ago, it was the weekend after the death of George Floyd, that I personally will never experience the injustice that these individuals are experiencing. But it doesn't make it less important for me to shout out that there needs to be change for it. Just because that I live in the place of privilege does not mean that I shouldn't use that privilege to pull everyone back up. It is the gospel story of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was born of privilege. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, was born of privilege. God was God, the creator and controller of all things. And God stepped out of privilege to put on flesh to become Jesus Christ. And God didn't just step out of privilege to put on flesh to become Jesus Christ, as I share many, many times in Philippians 2:8, that he humbled himself to the complete image of man, even to the point of death, to death on the cross. Jesus Christ took his power to amplify the voices of those in need. God took his privilege and put on flesh and became the walking representative of salvation from sin and death. And as I think about this second thing that I wrote in my Facebook page as a joke, that, hey, turn on your mic. We need to turn on mics, gang. Because as we are called in Matthew to go ye therefore into all nations and to baptize them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, again, nations being collections of people and not just land masses. There are so many collections of people who we need to be the voices, the advocates for, to go out and to proclaim the gospel of freedom in such a way that it doesn't take 2 to 3 years of having that freedom for it to be realized. That as soon as the doors are open, we can celebrate it. You know, over these last two days, you know, the Supreme Court of the United States has become the microphone for many voices crying out to be heard. We had a DACA decision made by the Supreme Court that supports the needs of the voices of immigrants, saying they need a place to be and a place to thrive. It was a voice of support. It was a microphone turning on for that. The Supreme Court removing any opportunity of discrimination in employment places for LGBTQIA plus individuals. It's turning on the microphone for the rights of every human being to be heard. The voices calling out, can you hear me, to be heard. the celebrations. So those are the two jokes I made, the things that I would take away from the California Pacific Annual Conference meeting. And those are the two jokes that I made. Can you hear me? And you have to turn on your microphone. But those aren't jokes anymore. They're realities. We have dear friends calling out that want to know if we can hear them. And we, with our gifts and graces and skills and voices and feet, are the individuals that can become the ones that turn on their microphones so that they can be heard. Now here's the third point that I made, and this was never a joke. This is a sincere reality. My third point that I made is I am blessed, and I acknowledge that I am blessed, that I am an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church within the California Pacific Conference. I am blessed to be within an annual conference that strives to acknowledge injustice, that strives to balance out imbalanced scales, and pushes each other, not just to be the hands and feet, but to be the voices of Jesus Christ, for the voices that are calling out, can you hear me? I am blessed to be a pastor in a denomination, in an annual conference that pushes each other to do the things, to become the microphones that are turned on so that those voices can be heard, the needs can be heard, the realities can be heard throughout the world. When I grew up, there was almost a sheltered image of God for me. Almost like what John Wesley dealt with the Church of England. As I've shared in different presentations of my understanding of Methodist history, one of the first things that John Wesley had to deal with was the Church of England not being pleased that he was going outside of the church, of the chapels, of the worship areas to share the message of Jesus Christ, that everyone should be brought into these sacred places to hear this sacred message. But John Wesley proclaimed that the world is my parish, and it's his importance to go out to the world to take that gospel message to. I grew up with that understanding. I grew up with the idea that we went out on visitation to bring people into the building, to bring people into the worship setting so that they could hear the gospel of Jesus Christ and be transformed within the worship setting. And that was my goal. It's been my goal for years. It still is important. It's vital to bring people into the worship setting. One of the things that we have discovered as individuals living in the COVID environment is we live in a different identity of what it means to be all together in a sacred place. Our being all together in a sacred place isn't one building, but it's using our microphones and turning them on so that we can reach out to people in new, very unique ways, like a pastor sitting in his living room with the sun shining behind his back, shading his face on YouTube, sharing a message of Christ's gospel salvation by going out into the world and going to the needs of the world. A lot of times I grew up with the hearing, get them in, get them saved, and the problems disappear. And we have all seen over the years that that's not true. If we don't go towards the problems, if we don't address the issues, if we don't find a way to shine the face of Jesus Christ, grace, on the issues still exist. We cannot brush problems under the blanket of I'm a Christian. We have to become the hands and feet that go out and serve and actively do things that address the issues that we see. There's so many more. It's not just the Supreme Court and DACA and LGBTQIA rights. It's not just the racial inequality that we are dealing with right now. There are many, many, many things, many problems that exist throughout this world that we're called to go out and be the representatives of Jesus Christ towards, and to go out and care for, and to go out and do things about. And I am blessed to be a part of an annual conference that proclaims that necessity and pushes its leaders to do the same, to go out to serve and to touch lives in the places where they're experiencing hurt, fear, pain, and injustice. I want us to pray about that. That was my big takeaway from the annual conference, is to become the microphone so that voices can be heard. To be the person willing to use the power that I have to turn those microphones on to make those voices louder. And then celebrate the reality that I get to go out and serve and be present in that serving. That's our Bible study today. And usually at this part, I give you the prayer practices. So here's the prayer practices today. The first one is a meditative prayer of "Can you hear me?" As you go through this meditative prayer, I want you to allow yourself to experience what you think the needs in the world are, and push yourself to truly hear the voices that are experiencing those hurts. Once upon a time, my friend shared with me the platinum rule. And the platinum rule is to do unto others as they would want to have be done unto them. The platinum rule. I want you to hear the voices calling out for help, and truly hear what they're asking for. So that's the first prayer exercise. The second prayer exercise is this: how do you turn on the mic? I want you to take a moment in a prayerful meditation to pray over how do you turn on the microphone so that other people can be heard, or how do you turn on your microphone to advocate for them? And then third, I want you to pray prayers of gratitude. I want you to pray prayers of gratitude for the helpers, for the servants, for the advocates, for the ones who are becoming the hands and feet. I want you to share prayers about ways that you've done that. We have a church full of servants of Jesus Christ, either by homeless needs, the needs of the care of children, the needs and the care of those who find themselves in very hard places that need assistance. Even those who are stuck at home and just need a phone call. We are a church full of servants. And I want you to take a moment to celebrate and say thank you, God, for the ways that you've been those hands and feet. Hold on to all those things, friends. That was today's Bible study. My name is the Reverend Michael Drew Davis. My email is pastordrewdavis@gmail.com. God bless you.